Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode here on the SMP. Behind me is the iron farm we made last episode. It's all still working. It's really nice. I like this farm quite a bit. But in this episode, I think we're going to take some of these extra villagers from the villager breeder and start making our trading call. We have quite a few villagers actually piled up here. There's almost enough to entity cram, so I turned it off just temporarily. We can turn that back on later while we're setting all this up. But we have a whole villager breeder here to do, and I don't think this really would look very impressive as a time-lapse or montage or anything, so I think I'll just kind of monologue and rant about different things while setting up these villagers and kind of just record all that, and we'll see what happens. But let's go ahead and get started. So what I want to talk about is, well, villagers, which is, I mean, it's on the topic, I guess. But villagers have in the past kind of been an interesting topic, and I feel like a lot of people have kind of forgotten about the villager issues recently. But they were big enough in the past that Mojang even got involved and started doing like the experimental features to try and update villagers so that they were a little less overpowered. That was the concern most people used to have, and villagers are definitely very powerful. You can get quite a few resources from villagers and infinite amounts of those resources, so sometimes they're the only way to get resources renewably. But I've often kind of had the idea that maybe villagers aren't so overpowered. But first we gotta like kind of address the question of like, are they overpowered, you know? And I think to answer that question you kind of need to ask what something that's overpowered in Minecraft would look like. And I don't really know what that is because Minecraft is a very complex video game. And obviously like we can break it down into like its genre and it's just a voxel based survival craft game, you know, but like Minecraft doesn't really have much of a goal, if that makes sense. At least not in the way that a lot of people think it does. Like some people will make their own goals and like try and speedrun killing the Ender Dragon or all advancements, or some people just like to fish other people. I think most people like to build cool stuff, right? And that's kind of their end goal, is to build something cool. And I guess that kind of is what the goal of Minecraft is kind of whatever people want it to be. So Minecraft should kind of just be a platform for people to do their own thing. So tying that back into villagers, how do villagers kind of break this design philosophy is, I think it kind of is just, they are often the only way to get certain resources and the only way to get them renewably. And I think that's kind of breaks down this infinite number of paths that Minecraft has and kind of forces you to mess with villagers. And a lot of people don't like that, and I think that's reasonable because, I mean, that is a concern. I'm not in this category. I actually like playing with villagers, but a lot of other people would like other options, and I think that's really how Minecraft used to be, was you had different options to get resources, and they were all kind of equally viable. Like, fishing for mending books was just as viable as trying to find a desert temple or something and getting one in a loot chest. So they were all kind of like equally bad. Whereas villagers are like at least decent. So a lot of people will feel like they have to use villagers. And that's what this problem is. So I don't really know how to fix this because I'm not a game designer or anything, but I guess I should probably suggest something here. So I think nerfing villagers isn't a good idea. I think nerfing villagers would actually cause the problem of how do you get a lot of resources of certain types in Minecraft, like mending books. How do you get mending books in Minecraft if you nerf villagers? Because there's really not another good option out there. I mean, you can fish them up, but that's just not. You're not going to get a good quantity of mending books, and you need a good quantity to make all your tools and armor have mending. But nerfing villagers would kind of create that problem of like, okay, now how does this work? How do we get good gear anymore? And it would be just such a long grind that it would be really hard to actually take the time or have the time in the first place to actually play Minecraft. And I don't think we should make Minecraft hard. I don't think Minecraft is a game that should be hard. So I think the other way to approach it is probably the better one, and that's to make other things at least almost as good as villagers. And you might be able to like take a few things off of villagers so that they're not that you can't get resources through those villagers, but you can get it through other stuff. For instance, I think glass. You can't renewably get glass except through villagers as far as I know. There's other ways to get glass, of course. You can dig up sand and smelt it and everything. But that's not renewable. Sand isn't renewable except through wandering traders. So like, it's just not a good idea to get glass in any other way. So I think like, if you, for instance, made another way to get glass, you could reasonably not have villagers provide glass. But I think we need other options that are at least as good as villagers are now at providing things like glass or mending books or even diamond gear. What these are, I have no idea. Like I said, I'm not a game designer, but something that's as good as villagers, I think would fit into the game pretty well. I don't know what that would look like though. But there's actually another issue in Minecraft that I think is pretty similar, though it's different in a key way that kind of flips the solution around. So Mojang actually got involved on this issue too, and they tried their own fixes for this in the same way that they tried to fix villagers. Never added officially into the main game, but I think it's interesting that you could kind of see where they were going with certain parts of this. It's a transportation issue. Transportation in Minecraft is kind of broken in the same way. You can only really use an elytra to get around. Everything else is just so much worse than elytra. So everybody uses the elytra all the time. But this issue is a lot more simple than the villager issue, so you can kind of break it down and understand the different parts a little bit easier. There's only a couple things going on in transportation where there's a lot of systems around villagers. So really, with transportation, you got the elytra, which of course is going to be your best choice in most cases. You got horses and mules and stuff like that. You have minecarts, you have boats, including like ice boats and things like that. But the problem with that, with this whole system, is that the elytra is just too good. I think it's just too good compared to everything else, and everything else is just so much worse than the elytra. So if you take the elytra, we can just compare the speeds of different things, and immediately horses are like a fraction of the speed. Minecarts are slower than horses are. I think boats, I don't know exactly where they land, but they're definitely slower than elytras unless they're on ice, in which case they are faster. But you have to have ice for the boat to be on, which doesn't occur naturally very often. And so it kind of usually requires setup for this to kind of work. But because of how much setup it takes, usually it's not a good idea. Usually it's a better idea to only set those up whenever it's a far enough location away and you're going to be going back and forth very often. I did this last season in the Nether roof. I set up a ice boat highway kind of thing to my Froglight farm and to the stronghold for the inn, everything like that. But that was really the only 2 times I did that. Everywhere else I chose other methods, because really these are pretty niche situations where you would want an ice boat highway. Whenever you have an elytra, often it's faster to not stop and get in a boat than it is to use the ice boat highway, even though you would be traveling at a faster speed while you're on the ice. Of course, horses and mules and different things like that are kind of tied to the terrain, so things like mountains and trees and rivers are going to block your path a little bit more often than with an elytra, because elytras can just fly over everything. Minecarts need rails, boats need water most of the time, so all these options kind of have their drawbacks, but elytra doesn't. It really doesn't. There's not really a situation where you can point to and say, it would be really hard to use the elytra, but it would be really easy to use something else. So that's kind of just to dissect this issue and say, okay, here's the issue, and kind of explaining the things around it, but now what do we do about the issue? And I think there's something about this that I haven't actually touched on yet, and it's what do these things enable you to do that you couldn't otherwise already do? So with the villagers, for instance, villagers enable you to have mending on your armor and your tools that you couldn't really get any other way. But what do elytras do? What are they able to do that you couldn't do before? And I think there's only a couple things, and they're not very significant things. And it's moving up and down flexibly and easily and everything like that. And moving across the outer end islands, again, easily, efficiently. And those two things, I think, are unique to the elytra. You can't really do that in any other way. I mean, you can technically like ender pearl across most outer end islands, especially if you have like a riptide trident, but that's really risky. So it's not something that many people do unless they're really skilled with like aiming ender pearls. And you can move up and down on various things like bubble vaders and scaffolding or ladders or even happy gas, but they're either slow or they're very rigid. Like bubble vaders, you have to set up and then you can't really move them afterwards, so it's not something you really want to be doing all the time everywhere. So it's kind of about that flexibility of vertical movement and the outer end islands, especially because that's where you find elytra, right? You want to be able to use them and kind of have a reason to use them in the outer end. So with those things in mind, we want to keep the elytras to be able to do that, but we don't want the elytras to kind of step over or be too good that everything else feels bad in comparison. So that either means nerfing the elytra from its current state or buffing everything else. And I don't see a reasonable way in which you can buff everything else to the point to where they're equivalent to elytras. That's what Mojang has tried to do in a few of the like experimental snapshots, and they just kind of don't work. There's the minecart experimental kind of fix, which allows them to kind of get infinite momentum, and although that kind of works, it isn't fast enough or reliable enough for those to be a real alternative to the elytra. You still have to set up quite a bit just to get it to work. It's still kind of hard to use, especially on your own. So I don't think buffing things like minecarts would work very well. Not to replace the elytra, maybe in like just kind of the grand scheme of the game, could be really interesting to have better minecarts, but I don't think it would work to solve this issue. I think to really solve this issue, you gotta nerf the elytra, which I know is kind of something that nobody wants, but I think it could work. And the reason why I think this could work is because last season I didn't use the elytra at all. Intentionally, of course. If I didn't think about it, I probably would have just gone to the outer end and gotten an elytra and used it all season, but I intentionally didn't use the elytra, and I had fun, surprisingly. A lot of people can't imagine playing Minecraft without the elytra, but it works, and it works really well, I think. Although you definitely don't move as fast in certain situations, it also causes you to create infrastructure that you otherwise wouldn't create, like the ice boats that I set up on the nether roof and the roads that I made in my town were all kind of designed around using certain transportation systems. And I even, like, whenever I was out exploring, I would use the mules all the time because that would just be faster. Um, or while I was in the nether, you don't want to bring your mule in there because it'll probably die. So I used striders to go across the lava lakes. And again, I would have never otherwise done that, except because I didn't use the elytra. So this taking away of the elytra really made the season, I think, a lot more dynamic and interesting. So I don't know if I'll be doing that again this season. It depends on what kind of infrastructure we have set up and like when we get it set up, because we're like so spread out that it just doesn't make sense to do it just yet. So anyway, I think we need to nerf the elytra, but I don't know exactly how to nerf the elytra, because how do you make something that can just fly over anything worse than something that's on the ground? It's really hard. It's a hard question to answer, but I think I have a couple ideas of how it could work while still keeping the ability to move vertically in a very flexible way and to be able to move across the outer in islands efficiently, you know? So how do I think this will actually work? There's 2 or 3 things that I think you could change about the elytra that would probably fix it while still having that ability to move vertically freely and to efficiently move across the outer end islands. And I think the things that I would change are, first of all, give it a lot less durability, so you're incentivized to use it sparingly. You don't want to use something that you can only use like 10 times before repairing all the time. You want to save it for when it's useful. So cutting the durability to a certain point, I don't know exactly what that point is, but like a certain point to where it's not as useful as where it is now. The second thing I would do is change the momentum so that rockets are more valuable. So you can't just kind of do the 40 degrees up, 40 degrees down trick to kind of keep your momentum forever. You have to use a rocket every couple of seconds or so just to make it a little bit even more costly than it was before. And then there's just one more thing I think would add, and it kind of pairs with the last one, and that's to make it to where you have to land and wait maybe a couple seconds before you use another rocket. So you can take off with a rocket, fly for a couple seconds, land for a couple seconds, then take off again with the rocket. And I think all those things together would make it still have the same functionality in that it would be able to move up and down freely, and you would be able to move efficiently throughout the outer end, but you wouldn't want to use it as often as you would a mule or something like that, and you wouldn't want to use it to go long distance like an ice boat highway. So I think, like, although this is something that probably nobody agrees with me on, is something that I think would actually work really well for Minecraft, because I've played with no elytra before, and it's pretty fun. Like, the way horses, especially mules, kind of interact with the game is at a pace that I think fits with the game and a lot of builds a lot better than the elytra does. There's still, of course, that vertical movement that I was kind of lacking last season. That's the only time I thought, okay, elytra might be useful. But once I set up bubble columns in most of the places where I needed to be, I kind of just didn't care about the elytra. I didn't need it. I was able to move up and down. I could kind of move wherever I wanted in my base within a good amount of time, only like a couple seconds, even without the elytra. So I think, like, realistically, the elytra could be changed. I don't think people would like it, which is why it's not even something that's been considered. But I think it would actually work, oddly enough. But anyway, that's just a hot take. I think we're pretty much getting close to the end of this footage, so I'll stop ranting now, and we'll get back to the video. Well, we're all out of adult villagers, and I restarted up the breeder, so we should have more eventually. But I think I'm kind of fine with leaving the episode here. So I think this is gonna be the outro. Um, but we did get pretty much everything I wanted except an Unbreaking 3 book. We need to get one of those still. So we'll still have to kind of fill out the rest of this trading hall. I do want another side and to organize all these guys a little bit better because they're kind of in weird spots right now. But that'll have to wait for next episode or something like that. Um, I'm kind of fine with just leaving it here. So thank you guys all for watching, and God bless.